There's a particular silence that follows certain people. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of someone who learned too early that their feelings were inconvenient. They move through the world with a composure that seems admirable until you realize it's not confidence, but compression. Somewhere in their childhood, these people were handed responsibilities that didn't fit their hands. They became translators of adult pain, managers of unstable homes, or simply invisible children who learned that to be loved, they must first be useful. And so they grew up too fast, not in age, but in emotional labor. They skipped the lesson on how to be young. Now, as adults, they carry a strange exhaustion, the tiredness of someone who's been working since they were small, even if no one saw it. This is their story. Some children never get to be children, not because they don't want to be, but because someone needed them to be something else. A mediator, a caretaker, a small, steady anchor in a house that wouldn't stop shaking. These are the children who learned to read the room before they learned to read books, who understood tone, tension, and threat long before they understood their own needs. They are the ones who packed their own lunches, who stayed quiet when the adults were fighting, who became fluent in apology and de-escalation before they were 10. This kind of growing up doesn't announce itself. There's no ceremony, no acknowledgement. It happens in the margins between a parent's sigh and a child's silence. It happens when a 5-year-old learns not to cry because crying makes things worse, when a 7-year-old starts comforting their mother instead of the other way around, when a 9-year-old becomes responsible for their younger siblings because no one else will be. And so they begin to carry things, not physically, but emotionally. They carry their parents' sadness, their family's instability, the weight of making sure everyone else is okay. And they do it without complaint, because complaining feels dangerous, because love, in their world, is conditional. It must be earned through usefulness, through silence, through not being too much. These children learn a devastating lesson early, that their worth is measured by how little space they take up and how much they can hold. That to be seen is to be needed. That to be needed is to disappear. They watch other children play and feel something like distance, a gap they can't name. While their peers are learning how to lose gracefully at board games, they're learning how to manage adult emotions. While others are developing imagination, they're developing vigilance. The world asks them to be older than they are, and they comply not out of strength, but survival. No one calls it trauma at the time. It's just life, just what had to be done. But inside, something shifts. The child begins to split. One part of them grows up rapidly, becoming competent, reliable, and emotionally astute. The other part, the part that needed to be held, to be messy, to be young, goes underground. It doesn't disappear, it just waits, frozen in time, unmet. Years later, that part will still be there, waiting to be seen, waiting to finally be allowed to be small. The roots of this early aging are almost always found in the same soil: instability. It begins in homes where the adults are struggling not because they're malicious, but because they're overwhelmed. Homes shaped by financial stress, mental illness, addiction, chronic illness, or divorce. Homes where the emotional weather is unpredictable, where safety is conditional, where a child learns that the best way to survive is to become very, very helpful. This phenomenon has a name in psychology: parentification. It's what happens when the roles reverse, when the child becomes the emotional or practical caretaker of the parent or the family system. When the child is placed in a position of responsibility they are not developmentally ready for, and it comes in two forms. Instrumental parentification is the more visible kind. It's the child who cooks, cleans, manages the household, takes care of younger siblings, or handles bills. It's the 10-year-old making dinner, the 12-year-old getting everyone to school on time, the adolescent working part-time to help pay rent. These are tasks that require maturity, organization, and sacrifice, and they steal childhood one responsibility at a time. Then there's emotional parentification. This one is quieter, harder to name. It's the child who becomes their parent's confidant, the one who listens to adult problems and offers comfort, the one who absorbs their mother's anxiety or their father's rage and learns to soothe it, the child who mediates conflicts, who reassures, who becomes a therapist without training or choice. This type doesn't leave visible marks, but it runs deep. It teaches the child that their role is to manage other people's emotions, often at the expense of their own. Why does this happen to some children and with others? Often, it's the sensitive ones, the intuitive ones, the ones who feel more, who notice more. The eldest child, tasked with responsibility by default. The child who seems mature for their age, a compliment, that's actually a warning sign. Families in crisis unconsciously lean on the child who can handle it. And that child, wanting to help, wanting to be loved, steps into the role. They don't choose it. It chooses them. Sometimes it's overt. A parent says, "I don't know what I'd do without you," or "You're the only one I can talk to." Other times, it's silent. The child simply observes the chaos and begins to organize it. They become the emotional glue, the one who holds everything together. And because children are wired to attach, to please, to survive, they do it, even when it costs them everything. The tragedy is this: these children often grow into adults who are deeply capable, responsible, empathetic, reliable. But beneath that competence is a child who was never allowed to fall apart, who learned that to be loved, they had to be strong, who learned that their needs were secondary, always. What happens to a brain that's forced to grow up too fast? What happens to a nervous system that's been in survival mode since childhood? The answer is, it adapts. But adaptation is not the same as health. When a child is placed in a chronic state of stress, navigating emotional volatility, instability, or neglect, their brain begins to prioritize survival over development. The amygdala, the brain's fear center, becomes hyperactive. It's constantly scanning for danger, even when there is none. This is hypervigilance. It's the reason these individuals, even as adults, can walk into a room and immediately sense the emotional temperature. They can detect the slightest shift in tone, the smallest sign of conflict. They've been trained to. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for emotional regulation, decision-making, and self-awareness, doesn't get the same developmental support. It's overridden by the need to react, to manage, to survive. This creates a nervous system that's wired for crisis, one that feels most comfortable in chaos, because chaos is familiar, calm feels foreign, rest feels unsafe. Attachment theory helps us understand this further. Children develop attachment styles based on their early relationships with caregivers. When those caregivers are inconsistent, emotionally unavailable, or overwhelmed, the child often develops an anxious or disorganized attachment style. They learn that love is unreliable. That closeness comes with conditions. To be safe, they must stay vigilant. For the parentified child, attachment becomes transactional. They learn that they are lovable when they are useful, when they perform, when they don't ask for too much. This becomes the blueprint for all future relationships. They give endlessly. They anticipate needs. They struggle to receive, because receiving feels vulnerable, and vulnerability, in their early experience, was dangerous. There's also the issue of developmental arrest. While these children appear mature on the surface, parts of their emotional development are paused. The part that learns to play, to rest, to trust, that part didn't get the chance to grow. So even as adults, they may feel internally young, fragile, uncertain, but they've learned to hide it so well that no one notices, not even themselves, sometimes. This is why rest feels so uncomfortable, why doing nothing feels like failure, why asking for help feels like weakness. Their nervous system has been conditioned to equate worth with productivity, to equate safety with control. And so they keep moving, keep working, keep managing, because stopping feels like falling. The danger passes, but the programming remains. The childhood ends, but the role doesn't. These individuals grow into adults who are outwardly functional, often highly successful, but internally exhausted. They carry the patterns of their past into every relationship, every job, every quiet moment, and the conflict begins. They want to rest, but they can't. The moment they stop, guilt rushes in, a voice that says, "You're being lazy, you should be doing more, you don't deserve this." Rest feels like failure, like negligence, like something must be wrong if they're not actively solving, fixing, or helping. They want to be cared for, but they resist it. When someone offers support, they deflect. They minimize. They say, "I'm fine," even when they're not, because being cared for means being vulnerable. It means admitting need, and need, in their early life, was a risk. It meant disappointment, rejection, being too much. They want to ask for help, but the words won't come. Asking feels like an imposition, a burden. They've spent so long being the one others lean on that reversing the role feels unnatural, dangerous even. So they carry everything alone. They suffer in silence. They burn out slowly, invisibly, and yet, they can't stop giving. Compulsive caregiving becomes their default. They anticipate needs before they're spoken. They overextend. They say yes when they mean no. They become the friend everyone calls in a crisis, the co-worker who stays late, the partner who does all the emotional labor. And they do it because it's the only way they know how to be loved. This is the paradox. They are desperate for softness, but terrified of it. They crave reciprocity, but don't know how to receive it. They want to be seen, but only the capable version. Not the one that's tired, not the one that's hurting, not the one that needs. Internally, they're at war. One part of them is still the child who learned to be small, to be useful, to earn love. The other part is the adult who knows, intellectually, that they deserve rest, that they deserve care. But knowledge doesn't undo conditioning, and so the cycle continues. They push until they can't anymore. They ignore their body's signals, the exhaustion, the headaches, the tightness in their chest. They override their needs because they've been doing it their entire life, until one day, the system cracks. It doesn't happen all at once. It's not dramatic, it's quiet, a slow unraveling. They wake up one morning and realize they can't do it anymore. The armor they've worn for so long has become too heavy. The role they've played so convincingly no longer fits, and they break. Sometimes it's burnout, the kind that's not fixed by a vacation, the kind that reaches into the bones and says, "You've been running on empty for years." Sometimes it's a panic attack that comes out of nowhere, or insomnia that won't let them rest even when they try, or a relationship that finally crumbles because they couldn't let themselves be seen. Sometimes it's a moment of recognition. They watch someone else, a friend, a partner, a stranger receive care without guilt, and something inside them breaks open. A realization. I've never allowed myself that. I've never believed I deserved it. This is the breaking point, and it's sacred, because it's the first time they stop performing. The first time they admit, even just to themselves, that they're not okay, that they've never been okay, that the strength everyone admired was actually a survival mechanism, a mask, a way of not being too much. Breakdown, in this context, is not failure. It's the system finally demanding what it's always needed: rest, truth, release. It's the part of them that was frozen in childhood finally thawing. And it hurts. It's disorienting. It feels like falling. Because in a way, it is. It's the collapse of the identity they built to survive. But it's also the beginning. Because you cannot heal what you do not acknowledge. You cannot change what you do not see. And this moment, this fragile, aching moment of breaking is the doorway. It's where awareness begins, where the real work starts. They start to ask questions they've avoided. Why do I feel so guilty when I rest? Why can't I ask for help? Why do I feel responsible for everyone's emotions but my own? And slowly, they begin to trace the answers back to the child who had to grow up too fast, back to the little one who learned that love was conditional, that safety required hypervigilance, that worth was earned through service. This is where healing becomes possible, not because the pain disappears, but because it's finally seen. Healing from parentification is not about erasing the past. It's about learning to parent the part of yourself that never got to be young. It's called reparenting, and it's one of the most tender, difficult processes a person can undertake. It begins with awareness, with naming what happened. Not to blame, but to understand. To say, I was a child who carried adult responsibilities. I was not equipped for that, and it shaped me. This alone is revolutionary, because for so long, these individuals have minimized their experience. They've told themselves it wasn't that bad, that others had it worse, that they should just be grateful. But healing requires honesty, and honesty requires acknowledgement. The next step is learning to set boundaries. For someone who grew up parentified, boundaries feel impossible. Saying no feels selfish. Disappointing someone feels catastrophic. But boundaries are not walls. They're the way we teach people how to love us. They're the way we protect our energy, our time, our worth. And learning to say, I can't do that, or I need space, is a reclaiming of selfhood. Reparenting also means learning to receive. This is perhaps the hardest part. It means letting someone care for you without deflecting, without minimizing, without immediately returning the favor. It means sitting in the discomfort of being seen not as the capable one, but as the one who needs it. It means trusting that you are lovable, even when you are not useful. Therapy becomes essential here, not because something is broken, but because these patterns are deep. They're wired into the nervous system. A skilled therapist can help identify the beliefs that were formed in childhood and gently challenge them. Beliefs like, I am only worthy if I'm needed. Rest is laziness. My feelings are too much. I have to do it alone. These beliefs feel like truth because they were formed so early, but they are not the truth. They are adaptations, and adaptations can be updated. Play becomes part of the healing too. Not childish play, but the kind of unstructured, purposeless joy that parentified individuals missed. It's painting without a goal, dancing without skill, laughing without reason. It's giving yourself permission to be unproductive, to be silly, to do something just because it feels good. This is how the inner child begins to thaw. Self-compassion is the thread that holds it all together. Because healing is not linear. There will be days when the old patterns return, when guilt creeps back in, when rest feels impossible again. And in those moments, the practice is not perfect. It's gentleness. It's saying to yourself, I'm learning. I'm unlearning years of conditioning. And that takes time. Slowly, something shifts. The hypervigilance softens. The compulsive caregiving eases. The guilt around rest begins to fade. Not because they've become a different person, but because they've finally given themselves what they always needed: permission to be human, permission to need, permission to rest without earning it. There is a particular kind of wisdom that comes from growing up too fast, a depth, a perceptiveness, an emotional intelligence that cannot be taught, only lived. These individuals, once they begin to heal, often become some of the most compassionate, insightful, and present people you will ever meet. Not because of what they endured, but because they chose not to let it define them. They understand pain in a way others don't. They can sit with someone in their darkest moment without flinching, without trying to fix, without turning away, because they know what it's like to be alone in it. They know what it's like to hurt in silence. And so they offer the kind of presence they once needed. They are deeply attuned to others. They notice the things most people miss: the shift in someone's voice, the sadness behind a smile, the weight someone is carrying but not naming. This attunement was born from necessity, but it becomes a gift, a way of seeing the world with rare clarity. And yet, the work is not to glorify the wound. The work is to integrate it, to say, yes, this happened. Yes, it shaped me. And no, I do not have to keep living as if I'm still that child. Integration means holding both truths at once: that they are strong and that they are allowed to be soft, that they survived and that survival does not require continued suffering. The transformation is not about forgetting, it's about choosing. Choosing to give themselves what was never given, choosing to break the cycle, choosing to believe that they are worthy of care, not because they've earned it, but because they exist. Some will go on to parent differently, to create the kind of home they wish they'd had. Others will redefine what family means, what love looks like, what safety feels like. And all of them, in their own way, will reclaim the softness they were never allowed. This is not a story of tragedy. It's a story of resilience, of transformation, of the quiet, sacred work of becoming whole. Because the child who grew up too fast does not have to stay that way forever. They can learn, slowly, to be young again, not in age but in spirit, in trust, in rest. And that is where the healing lives. Not in erasing the past, but in rewriting the future, one gentle, intentional choice at a time.